The South African Reserve Force Council was created in 1992. Its aim was to represent officers commanding the reserves of the South African Defence Force, SADF, during the transition to democracy. In 2002, it was given statutory status in the Defence Act. Its duties include being a consultative and advisory body to the Ministry of Defence and military veterans. But what is the role of this body in the new dispensation? We're joined now by Major-General Keith Mokoape. He's the chairperson of the RFC. Major General, a very good day to you. Thank you so much for making the time.
I greet you, I greet all your listeners, and thank you indeed.
You're traveling to different provinces, creating awareness about the RFC. What is the Reserve Force Council?
The Reserve Force Council, as you stated, is statutory. Militaries, the entire world, have a smaller permanent force and a sufficiently large part-time component. And militaries are not like your ordinary government departments where someone gets employed up to the retirement age. Militaries have got to be youthful, have to have young and fit people. And so people come into the military from communities, stay a few years and go out. And this difficult process of how you manage a civilian society that indicates willingness to join the military only as and when. And that's what the Reserve Force Council does, to inform civil society in general, especially institutions of civil society, the business sector, the faith-based organizations, the organized union bodies. All of these institutions must understand how, when their own people wish to enroll into the military, must have that understanding of twice the citizen.
So what is the RFC's relevance today?
The RFC's relevance today is that our military is aging. And in the military, as I said, you need the young, the fit, and the healthy. And these aged people are thoroughly trained in military skills that can very well fit into the developmental agenda. So my main campaign is to say to institutions of state, whether it is local, provincial, or national, we can assist you in the post-COVID economic reconstruction and recovery strategy in ensuring that our skills in the military get used in a collateral capacity, whether it is about clearing up informal settlements, whether it is about repairing water and sanitation facilities, literally everything that you may think of out there of basic service delivery can be done by our soldiers, especially the reserves, who are very available and have not been on call up for the last several years.
Just in terms of budget for the RFC per annum, where does their funding come from?
Well, the budget for the RFC itself is small, literally small, 8-9 million rand per annum that the minister makes available to my council of 18 people to do several things. The one thing is to research on knowledge internationally on best practice of how to run what is called civil military relations and civil military cooperation. Both of them are a science, are a discipline. We've got to create new knowledge and put it on the table of South Africa and say this is how best the military and civilian society can work hand in glove. The second thing that we do is to develop young reserve officers through research again, through creating of knowledge and enabling them to go out overseas and compete with their counterparts and again bring back best practice. The other thing that we do is to have military competitions, shooting competitions on specific learning skills that the SANDF may not have. And through this best practice accumulation from elsewhere, put that on the table of the SANDF.
So one of the critical responsibilities is to address the issue of military veterans who have fallen on hard times. What are you doing in this regard?
Well, these are two groupings. The component of the part-time soldier and the military veteran are actually two different components. The military veteran has played his part. He's either been a freedom fighter or just been a soldier in a military and has called it a day. And that has got to be respected and has got to be benefited for in so many ways as an appreciation from society for the contribution they have made. Here, where we talk about the active reserve, we're talking about your employee at SABC, your employee at ESCOM, at a specific time, having undergone basic military training. Normally, we bring them in for 2 years, and after 2 years, we retain some, but more, 2/3 must go out and continue with their private lives. But every year, they must come back to shape up for a minimum of 12 days so that they maintain the skills of those who remain inside. And when there is a surge, let's say an attack on South Africa, the two components come together in an interoperable manner to counter the enemy or to do any specific missions, such as peacekeeping, that we are ordered to do.
And the reserves have in the past been viewed with suspicion by other sections of the South African community. Has there been enough transformation to make them more representative?
Well, indeed. If you look at the grade 12s that we recruit into the National Defence Force, for a period of 5 years, 2014, 2019, we had more than 648,000 youngsters wanting to join the military. And we could only take 9,000, 1.5. Now, that is not right. For an important, strategically located country such as South Africa on the southern tip of Africa, we naturally have to have a very strong reserve component, in as much as we must have a strong permanent force. Now, the reserve force system had not been understood by the South African population in general, particularly because Africans were not allowed to be in the military pre-1994. So it had been white people who were members of the regiments, what we call the regiments, the units. They are scattered all over the country, concentrated mainly in major cities, Cape Town, Durban, Johannesburg. And this one-sidedness of representativity led, obviously, almost all reserve units led by white people. Post-94, most of the people who were joining were black. So you had a leadership that was white and a fellowship that was black, and that was not right. That is being corrected as we move forward with as much representativity plus gender representativity as possible. So that suspicion is winding off. Our only problem is that the regulars as well are aging, and we would like to assist, and this becomes a societal problem. Demobilization in itself does not just sit with the Ministry of Defense or the Military of Military Veterans. We need all institutions of society embracing a soldier who comes out to say, if you cannot be combat ready in the extent of jumping a trench with your knapsack, what else with your skills of logistics? What else with your skills of motor mechanics, diesel mechanics, etc., can you put on the table of society? And in this sense, we are saying if a person had been 20 years or so in the military, you can't expect that person, obviously, just like that, to be an entrepreneur on his own, an SMME. No, we are saying to municipalities, to provinces, let's develop something like development brigades, where we would say the Defense Force can help with people who are aged that is not yet retiring and be able to fill up the backlog of services. And we know there are backlogs of services. We know there are monies that get returned to the fiscus because the particular department might not have had sufficient human capital. Let's add up all this so that the soldier at 60, before he becomes a veteran, at least had contributed to socio-economic development.
I mean, for example, in terms of what you're saying, we've seen military reserves being called in to go and clean the Vaal River and providing very essential skills there. But now, in terms of, let's talk particularly in rural areas and farms where reserves have been used as private armies to protect some and persecute others. How are you dealing with this particular aspect?
Well, let's first go back to just rural development. You know, there are certain infrastructure backlogs that may be difficult to give to tender. If a child gets swallowed by a toilet somewhere in the rural backside of Limpopo, or a mud school collapses somewhere in the Eastern Cape, one school is there, another there, and yet the soldiers are all over. And the soldiers have got these skills. They arrive at a flat surface in Darfur, in the Sudan, and in no time, 1,000 men and women are in a shelter, water reticulation, sewerage, everything and everything. And we can take these collateral capabilities and put them onto the table of infrastructure, Ministry of Basic Education, Ministry of Human Settlements, etc., at the cost of the minister's monies, not at the cost of defense. And this is the hand-in-glove manner in which civil-military cooperation takes place. The same applies to rural safety. There's no reason why the police must be left on their own when, in fact, we are trained in such a manner that we must help them. That's true. But we are now talking about blanket security. In the days of apartheid, there used to be the commandos, and every town, every little area had this low-level trained commandos. We are today talking about setting up what we call a Mzansi home guard, where every area, whether it is commercial farming land or rural villages, etc., would have a presence. A presence, one, that helps in the delivery of basic services, but at the same time, it is the ears and eyes, information collection, intelligence collection, so that nothing overtakes us. And the same applies, obviously, to our porous borders. If we were to be properly organized with the rural people in those areas, we all then become a security network.
There have also been complaints that veterans are not taken care of. Others have even become homeless. Any interventions on the side of government? Well,
as I said, we now, because of budgetary constraints, aren't able to call up the reserves that we have, this part-time trained soldiers that we have. And we're saying, having trained them in lethal skills, we cannot afford that they walk the streets unemployed and unaccountable to anybody. And we are then saying, if we can have a buy-in in all the spheres of government, perhaps even in state-owned enterprises, that these people be given opportunities for employment, even if it is not long-term employment, because if someone will say, what about the youth? If you say you're a 45-year-old military man wants employment. But if we can get a buy-in and this thing works, the question would be, how long is a piece of string of post-COVID economic reconstruction and development? We don't know how long that piece of string is. These backlogs are very heavy for just one department in one term of office. If this can work well, then we will also draw up the soldiers who are what we call additional to structure in the regular force. Those that the permanent force say actually they must have exited, but they have problems as well in exiting because they don't know where. The man has been a major, has been a lieutenant colonel for all his years. Now you say you are on your own, go out there. If this works well, we'll draw this regular additional to structure members and ultimately draw in the veterans as well. And I think that the backlog in South Africa is so huge, it will take us another 15 to 20 years before we are on even keel where we would say that one department, given its mandate, will be able to manage with their budgets in that 5-year term.
So just take us through your roadshow. Who are you talking to? How can the public interact with this process?
Yes, ma'am. We are talking to those who have got budgets in their pockets, those who have got a mandate to deliver but find themselves unable in the year that they had been given the money. We are saying we don't want to take over. We are currently having an e-portal project where we are going to every place where we can find a militarily trained soldier who's a reserve, to say, give us your details, give us your level of skill, etc., etc., and we will put you against these people that are on the roadshow that I am conducting now. I'm talking to institutions such as municipalities. I'm looking at the district development model of the president, and I'm saying that in the interministerial task teams, such as Operation Pakisa, such as the district development model, where even the Minister of Defense has got a seat on these teams, we want to add value to there and say that we do know that there are funds available. We do know that there is backlog and we want to fit in. So we're talking to the unionists as well. Organized labor must never think that we are escape labor. We're talking to the private sector. We are aware that the private sector has lost more than 2 million jobs during the COVID-19. But we're still saying that there may be room where we think that our person is much more better to be trained quickly in your operations than just your graduate immediately coming out of an institution. And at the same time, we're not trying to be competing with people who have just graduated. We're talking to faith-based organizations. What is their role in the military? So the institutions of civil society that we're talking to are across the board. And sometimes when you go first to national, a policy level, it becomes yes. But if on the ground there hadn't been interaction and understanding and buy-in, things just don't happen. So sometimes it's better to go first to the ground. And of course, by the time you go national, you find it easier to get the two sides understanding. So that this is we're going to go across the country, and this program of the e-portal, we're saying on your cell phone, as Jonas Khadebe, you must be able to say, I was in the military and I was an engineer. When you press and you are in the Pinetown area, you must find, in fact, a business in Pinetown that you can be visible to, that may just need that type of person. So area-based, we are saying that we can be able, without necessarily creating confusion within the prime mission of the military, which is to defend the country, which is to ensure territorial integrity, and to ensure that there are ordered missions, such as now when we help with the COVID enforcement, without disturbing all those call-ups. We are saying a soldier not on call-up, must know that he's got a home where he will be directed to, either building a school that was collapsing or renovating that hospital or closing up potholes in the area of Pinetown, Pietermaritzburg. So it will be in the area of PE and East London, but in the far-flung outlying areas as well, we say the soldier is much easier to come along than putting things to central tender.
So I want to ask you this. As you prepare your schedule in terms of the stakeholders you want to be meeting, on the flip side, are you looking at what's the low-hanging fruit in terms of the areas and the specific things that you can immediately assist with in different parts of the country where there are challenges? Indeed,
ma'am. On the one hand, we cannot be everything to everybody. But at the same time, without necessarily bashing departments, we know that the informal settlements growth is beyond the capacity of human settlements, and it's creating, in fact, political problems. And we are saying that with the capacity that we have, if people have been living in plastic shacks and corrugated iron, it's easy for us to come with our tents and say, let's house them in some open space outside there, and then link up with them in saying, municipality, rezone, or which area have you rezoned already for residential? We have the equipment, we've got the graders, we've got the front-end loaders, and we are the builders ourselves. So together with the teams of human settlements can then, and the people on the ground as well, because we must give people an opportunity to earn a little living as well. So we can be able to wipe out informal settlements, in my understanding, in a matter of time that would not be the 20 years, the 15 years. We can do that in a much shorter time. The same applies to mud schools. We know how many villages have parents and teachers worrying when it rains. The mud school is going to collapse. We know the number of schools that were vandalized just in Gauteng in the period of COVID-19. So there are certain ministries, not more than 3, that we could target. If we say Minister of Human Settlements and Water and Sanitation, Minister of Basic Education, and Minister of Roads, let's help you in the small town sort out the roads in Standerton and in Lichtenberg or whatever the case might be. These would be what are hanging fruits, because we also know that South Africa, at its level of economic income, is, I think, the only country in the world that year in, year out has departments returning money to national treasury for inability to accomplish because of human capital. Now, we sit with this human capital that can be ordered, and we are selling an important product here. Yeah. We are selling discipline. We are selling punctuality. We are selling command and control. We're selling everything that makes a person understand, this is my task, I do my task, I question later. Yeah. Now, this kind of teamwork and trust and working together is something that you put in this environment of unemployment, and you can then tackle the backlog of your infrastructure. And the president says, now the time of talk is over. This is implementation time.
I like that you started the conversation about referring to budgets. And one of the big challenge for government, and you're saying here that you will be interacting with unions as well, is the ballooning public wage bill. And obviously, the people you're talking about who are going to have to go in and work have to be paid. Are you having a conversation about this and how to counter this particular challenge?
Well, this is exactly what General Mathibe is doing. General Mathibe, with her e-portal, is conducting research and saying to a soldier who has not been called up over the last 2 years, right, Corporal so-and-so, you have been paid much more when you were on call-up than an equivalent person in the market, in the private sector, what that person is earning. You earn more than sometimes the amounts of monies that we pay the military are just above the norm. And so, soldier men, will you be ready that when we go do the potholes and sort out the mud schools, you shall not be paid what you are getting on a call-up? And that when we go to the mud school, it's not a military call-up. It is something out of call-up. You may not be wearing uniform, but it is better than sitting out there in an environment of 40% unemployment in the area in which you live. Soldier men, are you ready to come with these bands? The second thing is, soldier men, we're not going to pay you the tariff of the municipality that is rank-based. So whether you are a lieutenant colonel high up, or you are a captain or corporal low down, you're going to get what the municipality affords for its people. In other words, we're not creating a collision course between these soldiers and the workers who are unionized. We may perhaps say, if we were to hook on what has benefited the military veterans. The military veterans have been included in the vulnerable groups of youth, women, physical disability, and the fourth is military veterans. We are saying even the unemployed reserves, unaccountable to anybody, must be included in the vulnerable groups. So there's accountability and work to be done. Then the last thing would be that this so-called call-up, which is not military call-up, is not guaranteed. But to the extent that it alleviates your problem of no call-up and no job, and lethal skills in your hands, you may fall prey to certain syndicates that will create problems for us. We must know where you are at any one time. And if we build this thing all together, that's why we say it is civil military cooperation. It is coming out of civil military relations. It is about how the society is in fact responsible for the military, and that resonance must show itself all the time.
We have to wrap up our conversation, but just a quick one. If there are people watching who would like to interact with this process, just give us the details of the e-portal.
The details of the e-portal are on the RFC website, www.rfc.org. And if they want to see anything related to the reserves, they can go to www.defres.dod.mil.za. And in any case, even if they just Google Reserve Force System in South Africa, a whole lot of documents will come that will interest them. Now, the most important thing is that I, as the Reserve Force Council, reports to the minister, and I advise the minister and the deputy minister. Then there is another section of the uniformed reserves, the reserve division, that is now reporting to General Shoke. It's got a general, reports to General Shoke, advising General Shoke about how many people have been recruited, how many have been trained, how many are available for borderline security, for peace support in the DRC, and so forth and so on. We are on the system, how the system works, and for society like you, Desiree, even at your age, because we say there are 4 components. I know you want to wrap up. The first component of 18 to 35 and the fit who can run. The next component is artisans, medics, and people, music people, those type of people, journalists like you. Then you have the third component that is of what we call the pool of specialists, people who write doctrine, who research about how best this defense force of ours must be the best of the best. The last is then what I call blanket cover, that every area must have a certain level of security. And so the reserve force system is truly from 18 years to the day you go to the crematorium or you go 6 feet down. In the olden days and in other advanced countries, it starts even at grade 8, where youngsters are shown how to march and drill without the guns, what is discipline, how to go on boot camps in a very organized manner, navigate under stars, cross the river without a bridge. And by the time they are in grade 12, they are already sharpened, ready for a military life, even if there is no conscription.
Major General, you nearly committed a huge blunder there, revealing a woman's age on air.
I nearly gave them a woman's age on air.
Well, let's thank you for talking to us today. Major General,
thank you very much.
It's a very important program, and Major General Keith Mokoape, we hope he can come back at some point. He's the chairperson of the RFC. We hope he can come back at some point just to give us an update in terms of how the roadshow is going.